So Bob, emails, what do you say?
Yes.
So this email is from patron Christina, who DM'd me on Patreon. She says, "Hello, Dr. Kirk. You talk about therapists having problems with paperwork, but you don't expand on that too much. I worked for a clinic that has lots of Medi-Cal billing." I'm guessing that's like the Medicaid of California. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of that before? Yeah. Medi-Cal? Mm-hmm. Okay. I worked for a clinic that had lots of Medi-Cal billing requirements, and staff were not paid overtime, but expected to bill up to 100% of their work hours and incentivized to bill more.
Whoa.
Yeah, so let me sift through this. Okay, so I worked for a clinic that did lots of Medi-Cal. So I'm guessing the inclusion of the Medi-Cal in there is that they're not getting reimbursed a lot for the services, typically from Medicare and Medicaid.
Yeah.
And because we have legislatures that don't allocate enough funds to reimburse mental health clinicians and other clinicians, physicians for their work, because we live in a country that has the most wealth that's ever been amassed in the entire known universe, and yet we don't give a shit about human beings, and we just keep funneling money into CEOs who can pay for millions of doctors to help millions of people, particularly when we're talking about other countries, and we just keep voting for the same stupid politicians over and over again.
You say it like it's a bad thing.
And so anyway, so we have that. It worked for a clinic, and so what that does to a lot of these agencies is it strains things, because they want to provide a service. Sometimes they might be kind of required to provide a certain amount of service to a community. And so you, at least internally or externally, you have this pressure on an agency to have a certain amount of production, and then you don't pay them enough. And then what ends up happening is these agencies scramble to figure out how they're going to make it work. And one of the things one of the levers they can pull is to pressure labor to work harder. Yeah. Meaning that they, as patron Christina is saying, is expected to bill up to 100% of their work hours. So for those who don't know, if you have 40 hours in a week and you work at an agency as a therapist, the highest number of billable hours you could possibly eke out I'm guessing would be 30, maybe 35 out of 40, which would be pretty tough, because if you have 35 hours of therapy in a week,
that's a lot.
Yeah. And for people who might think, well, hey, when I'm at my job, I'm working all 40 hours. Well, one, there's paperwork, but there's also a lot of meetings and a lot of things you have to do, especially when you're in an agency. There's like collaterals you have to call that aren't billable necessarily. Mm-hmm. Also, there's going to the fucking bathroom. Mm-hmm. Like that takes time. Like one of the things I notice about myself is that I'll have a day, 16 hours to work, and I'm making content, and I'm thinking, okay, I don't have anything to do. Nothing's on the calendar. And so I'm just going to, for 16 hours, I'm going to make content. I've been doing that a lot lately, by the way, because I just been trying to get a lot of content in the can, as they say, recorded and ready to schedule at a later date. Mm-hmm. And I will find that what ends up happening is I only end up actually getting done the amount of work that I think maybe 8 or 10 hours would get. And I think, well, what's going on with this extra 6 hours? Because I feel like I'm working all day. But if I just observe myself, there are times when I might just take a break and look at a YouTube video for 15 minutes. Yeah. Or I might want to play with the dogs for 5 minutes, or I might have to go to the bathroom. You might want
to eat lunch in there somewhere.
Or you might text me, or
I do that all the time. Yeah.
Eating, that sort of thing. Or I don't know, there's a random utility bill that comes in, and I'm like, what's going on with it? There's so many things that can just get in the way, and people know this, but when you're a therapist at an agency, all those things happen, but it's within the agency. So your colleague says, oh, can you take a look at this? Or someone walks in with a dog and you pet the dog for 5 minutes or 2 minutes and you're thrown off. Right. Or there's a treatment plan that needs a little bit of doing. Or someone stops in your office and socializes for 5 minutes. So to say that you're going to bill that these folks need to have 100% of their payable hours basically means that they're saying, look, you have to have 40 hours of billable hours, and you're going to have to figure it out beyond that, which probably means that they're working 55 hours a week. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So anyway, going on, they began writing up people who did not, and again, I blame the politicians and secondarily the voters. These agencies are not, it's not like Amazon. It's not like the CEO of these agencies has trillions of dollars.
Oh, right.
And is taking a rocket into space. The executive directors of these agencies, sure, they might have like a new Toyota or something, but these individuals are not rolling in money. That tells you something about the problem. I'm talking generally speaking. I'm sure there are some agencies where that happens, but anyway, so going on, they began writing up people who did not bill all of their time, and some people lost their jobs or were pushed out. It is impossible work.
Agreed.
Yeah, that sounds awful. I mean, did that ever happen to you at an agency where you were pressured to have a lot of billable hours?
Oh, yeah. The first job I got in Seattle, there was absolutely that pressure, and then there was actually a game plan about how to do it. So yeah, then the second agency.
What was it like?
It was case management, so it's not therapy, and it was in the community, so it was mostly not in the office. In fact, they discouraged us from seeing clients in our office.
I could see case management being even worse because, in terms of billable hours, that's probably like client contact, right?
Yeah, it is. It's
and
exactly
with case management, there's a lot of things you're probably having to do out of those hours that are required to be the sort of helper that you're going to be when you're in person, right?
Yep. So, but you can only bill for, this is 30 years ago, so, it's not this way now. And my caseload was 18 when I started there. And the way they did it is, if you saw, they billed by the quarter hour, and if you saw somebody for even 2 minutes of the quarter hour, you could bill the whole quarter hour. So we would show up at appointments at 12:58, say, for a 1 o'clock appointment, and stay till 2:02, and we could bill for 90 minutes instead of just the hour. And then
that doesn't make any sense because it's only 4 minutes total, which would mean at the best you could rise it to 15 plus, but not 30 plus.
The way it worked, this is the way they told us to do it. This is the way it worked. And then you use your travel time because the next client is at, say, 2:30, show up at 2:28.
Now, I've seen this before, and I do not support fraud, but I do support using the system to make it work.
Yeah.
Because basically the case management is paid through the government, correct?
Yeah.
And so
Medicaid.
The individuals on the ground level, the labor and the managers of the labor are saying, if we actually, follow the payment schedule that the government and the legislatures and supposedly the voters want, then we will not be able to do our jobs. So the only way to make this work is to fudge the numbers. So we have to overbill to actually get you paid, right, so that you can actually get enough money to get through your life and also have a little bit extra time. Because, if you bill for an hour and a half, for an hour and 4 minutes, that gives you 26 minutes to do all the other things. It's not like you use that 26 minutes to go to the casino. You were doing work, but it just wasn't considered billable because the legislatures didn't designate that as billable time. Because, just imagine that, the government will designate that is billable, but that is not.
Yeah.
The government, I'm telling you, people, they designate that, and they're doing it today. And when you have legislatures and also you have the voting public who ignore mental health,
right,
and deprioritize it, and then you have whole political parties that also do the same, then you get squeezed out as labor. Right. The easy solution is you just say, well, not only is your client time billable, but also other time that you spend away from clients that is in the service of the client. Because we all understand you don't have to be in front of a client, especially as a case manager. I mean, I would assume most of your hours as a helpful case manager were not in front of the client. It was talking to collaterals and building plans for them and connecting them with other people and figuring out how to solve their problems, you know, and networking yourself. Anyway, but
Yeah.
so you were, so was it a hardship for you at the time?
I was 20, how old was I? I was 25 years old. I had a lot of energy.
Okay.
And I just gamed it.
Did your colleagues get upset about it at all?
I think we all grumbled about it to a degree because it was constant pressure and it only got worse.
Right. So you started with, you know, when you got hired, there was a certain amount of hours that you probably could work in a week, say 40 hours.
Right.
And then the pressure comes up and now you're probably working 45, but being paid the same.
Yeah.
And then they put more pressure. Now you're looking at maybe 48 hours and it sucks because you're overworking yourself during those 48.
Right.
But also you're probably having to do things that you wouldn't do normally if you were actually trying to help the clients.
Yeah.
Because you're now, you know, like one of the things that I would see is people would like force their clients into the office when they wouldn't have like say the contract states that if they get the clients in the office for 5 hours, they can bill for all 5 of those hours.
Right.
But the clinician left to their own devices would say, well, we only need 3.
Right.
But the therapist would be like, but I'm going to get fired if I don't get them in the office. So there'd be all these like game playing from the therapist standpoint of just like, well, how about you guys? God, this is all flooding back to me. I remember hearing colleagues talk about how I never had to do this, but I would hear colleagues talk about how they would give advice to each other. I remember there was this, you know, circle of therapists going, here's what I do. And one therapist was like, well, what I do is I have the kid come into my office to do their homework and then I just do my paperwork. Uh-huh. And my client is in the office and it totally counts.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's silly.
Yeah. It's criminal.
I mean, you might as well not even bother having the kid come in because they're not getting anything that they need to get. You might as well just lie about it because...
so then you have that too.
Right.
Which essentially, when you have 64 minutes of work and you bill for 90, that's lying, right?
Oh, yeah. No, for sure. Yeah. It was all gamey. And then the second job, I learned how to do the paperwork in such a way that it was the paperwork was it was minimally intrusive. I could kind of whip through it and knew what I could pay attention to and what I could, ignore essentially. And my caseload, let's see, was 25. No, I actually don't remember what my caseload was, but it was still high pressure. I'm sure it's worse now.
So you were a therapist at an agency,
yep.
And your first thought in your memory is that you had to have at least 25 hours of client time in those 40 hours.
Yeah.
Which is, I think it's way worse now, by the way.
I'm no doubt it's worse. I don't know. It must be very hard to survive.
I would supervise interns who I think it was like 35. Yeah.
Can you imagine when you're an intern?
Yeah. Because on paper, it's to the politicians who run this show,
sure.
It sounds reasonable.
Right.
It's like, well, you're seeing 40 hours. You're a therapist, right? So that's all you do. So you have 35 hours. And the other thing is mental capacity.
Oh, yeah.
Like when I was in private practice and I was seeing 25, 27 clients a week, it was hard mentally.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I had time because I was in private practice. People came to my house. So yeah, technically I guess I only worked, and I've got my paperwork down pretty quick. So say I worked 28 hours a week and I didn't take on clients, or I wasn't referred clients had come to me that needed a lot of case management outside. Right. So I was basically just doing therapy and a little bit of paperwork, but it felt like I was working 60 hours a week.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a capacity problem.
Yeah.
So if you're forced to, bill 40 hours or do 40 hours of therapy, mm-hmm. You're probably by hour 22, that's Wednesday.
Yeah.
You're probably pretty much cooked.
Yeah, like an analogy to this that just popped in my head was, before I was a therapist, I worked at a shoe store, Foot Locker, for those familiar, at Westlake Mall in Seattle. And it was a terrible job. But the analogy is, if, in retail, imagine if from the minute you showed up at work until the minute you left, customers are constantly coming at you and asking you to do something. In Foot Locker, it would have been like, I want to see these shoes. And there's a line of people, and there's literally no break.
Right.
I mean, maybe technically you can go to the bathroom if you need to, and maybe there's a lunch break in the middle, but every second of your workday is spent doing, even if it's a fairly mundane thing like selling shoes and helping customers.
Right.
Being a therapist, when you are sitting in that seat as a therapist for your client, you have to have all guns ablazing. You can't sit back. You have to be constantly paying attention and thinking. And sometimes it gets very emotionally draining and difficult, because that's the gig. And it's not okay. In terms of Einsteinian space-time continuum, yes, it is an hour of work if you clocked it, but it's not the same as, it's another analogy would be like, imagine if you were an auctioneer or some kind of a person who gives TED Talks or something. Oh, and you give TED Talks and inspirational speeches.
Oh yeah,
and that's your job, and so you work 40 hours a week. Okay, well, obviously, if we could cram in, audiences that sort of rotate in and out of your TED Talk arena, then you could do that for 8 hours a day for 5 days a week, right? And the person's like, no. After an hour and a half, I'm dead. Like, my brain can't do anymore. That's what it's not maybe that bad, but it's in that direction.
Oh, it's in that direction for sure.
Your brain is working so hard, and your heart is often working so hard that there's only so much you can handle. And it's a paternalistic idea as well of just like, well, it's just talking. So, it's not hard like man's work, like finances or
bricklaying.
Yeah. That's real work. That's tiring.
Work, right.
Like, you're just sitting there. You're just lazy work, and yeah. But first, Bob, we need to take another break because this is going on all along. What do you say? Let's take a break.
Let's take a break.
Okay, we're back from the break. Yeah, so that's the landscape that Christine is talking about.
Yep.
And she's saying it is impossible work. So her question is about paperwork. Mm-hmm. So she's like, how do I manage that now that I'm getting this pressure? I think basically what she's saying, if she's working in California, 40 hours a week, she's seeing clients 40 hours a week, and then that means, but she has 10 minutes in between every client, right? So, or 5 minutes. And so wouldn't it be nice if you could actually just get all of your paperwork done in that time? And, I don't know what Christine is saying. It's possible that with the Medi-Cal system, they actually do pay for collateral contact and stuff, so maybe it's not 40, but
yeah.
Point is that how do you get your paperwork time down? So her questions are, do you have any resources that can help therapists document more efficiently? Yeah, there are books that you can buy, workbooks that you just Google on Amazon or any bookstore about therapist note-taking guides. There are some pretty prevalent guides that I've used in the past, and they're pretty broad. Have you seen these kind of guides before?
Yeah.
But they definitely do give a direction. To me, the best thing you can do is have a mentor that actually does the work that you're doing within the system that you're doing. Because for me, that's what when I would help, I knew the system of my mentees and my supervisees, whether it's private practice or an agency, and I would go through it line by line, because it's changing sometimes. So, the online forms that they have to fill out, and I would just go line by line. I'd be like, okay, that box right there, you're putting in way too much information. That you could cut that down to literally a phrase if you wanted to. That box needs to have that in it. That drop-down menu will always be this, so don't just click that always. Don't think about it too much. Also, in the beginning of your career, everything takes longer because you don't know what the fuck you're doing.
Learning curve.
Yeah. Like when I started out and I would come to diagnosing a client, I would have to start from scratch as I was sitting there after the session. Now I can diagnose people in 30 seconds in the beginning of the first session, depending on what it is, you know, not a personality disorder, but, you know, because I'm always talking with them about medical necessity and insurance and stuff. And so in the very beginning, I'm not always talking, I'm saying I always talk with them right up front so that we know that we can actually bill so that they don't have to pay out of pocket to the insurance company. I don't use insurance anymore, but back in the day, it's been a long time since I had a new client. So anyway, point is that I would have those conversations. And if you're working in a place like this, that would be something you would do. Yeah. And in the beginning of my career, it would take me weeks to diagnose someone confidently. And now, you know, you learn and you hear certain things a client says, and then you know not to go down roads. You can narrow down on it much faster, you know? And so that's another issue. But yeah, find a mentor in your area, in maybe even your agency, and say, how long is it taking you to write a progress note or something, or a treatment plan? Right. Find the person that has it down very quick and say, can I just watch you do it? Yeah. Or could you give me some tips? Yeah. That sort of thing. Also going on, why are there such requirements for billing and documentation? Well, I think I've already been over that. Yeah. Do you have any huge amounts for your private practice, or do other therapists have this problem? Bob, what do you think?
Huge amounts of documentation?
Problems.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Describe what it's like.
A progress note takes less than 3 minutes to write. I know you're faster than me. I think about you all the time, and I am writing out my words now. I use very few.
You use pen and paper.
I do use pen and paper.
Yeah.
I can't type much faster than that anyways.
But with typing on a computer, you can copy and paste. Because there's certain phrases with clients that, especially after 7 years, it's not likely that we're, having a completely mind-blowing, we can have mind-blowing things in the session, but in terms of like what we're working on, it's not new. Yeah. We've been working on it for a while. So, like the initial sentence could be, so anyway, you can save time, but 3 minutes is great. But anyway,
3 minutes,
go on.
And basically it has these criteria: the date, how much they paid, who was there, and then what did they talk about? What did we do? And how did it help, or that it was helpful? Mm-hmm.
So what would be an example of that note? What would it sound like?
So John and Carol were present.
These are fictional people.
Yeah. I don't know who John and Carol are. I'm sure they're lovely. They wanted to talk about...
The closer you get to John, he's kind of a dick.
It's true, because in this session, you know what he did? Okay. He's like trying to control the purse strings, So like me and John, we didn't come to fisticuffs, but...
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how do you describe that?
Yeah. John and Carol came in, are present. They wanted to talk about their financial arrangement. We discussed in terms of the attachment insecurities or meanings that are, I might say insecurities, I might say meanings, I might say longings. That word can shift. Their attachment, longings, or meanings. And they indicated that this was helpful.
That's it.
Next appointment.
That's great. So anything beyond that, you're either spinning your wheels, or you have a bad supervisor that is pressuring you to do too much for no reason. It shouldn't have to be anything more than that. Yeah. And unless it's suicide or homicide.
Oh, yeah. No, then you want to be
Then
mindful.
you're writing pages, potentially. Yeah. And you do it in session. That's what I do. Like if I have a client that is suicidal, because it also helps me to make sure that I'm crossing all my T's, right?
Yeah, that would. It's
like, okay, so what you're saying is this. I need to write this down to make sure I got it. So, okay, going on. Yeah, in private practice, for me, my notes, I could take them. I also had my own system of taking, one, it was on the computer, so I could copy and paste some things, but also I type faster than I write. Mm-hmm. Also, with my system, it wasn't one of those online systems. Mm-hmm. The online systems, you click on the button, it takes about 3 seconds for it to load. Every time you do it, it takes a while. You type, there's a number of boxes you have to fill out. Whereas for me, I streamlined it fit my taste such that I could do all the things like indicate the time and the charge and who was present and the note and potentially treatment plan comments. I can do it very quickly within the same field of view, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But I understand that for some people they have to exist in a certain system.
Yeah.
And by default, even if I were involved in that system, it would take me like 5 times longer because you have to click on this button and wait for that to load and
right.
So yeah.
And the things that you get asked aren't the things that you have to document when you're in private practice.
Yeah.
Like there's so much more that has to be justified or documented or whatever it is they do. I don't even know anymore, but
yeah.
So
yeah, another thing to know for yourself is what's the landscape, because right. You're writing the note, we can assume you're writing the note for the client. The note is for you and the client. But so many of us are writing the note for some other entity, like an auditor or a supervisor. And of course, they are overseeing the note that is used for you and the client. But so many times, novice clinicians and otherwise, they completely lose sight of that, and agencies will lose sight of that. Yeah. That the only reason why you're writing the note is for the auditor, so that you can make sure that you continue to get a designation as a licensee or a certified provider for Medi-Cal, and thus you can still make your money, because these government agencies will occasionally audit mental health service agencies, and if you are out of compliance, they will pull contracts or penalize or something, and then your entire business it goes out of business. Right. And so the anxiety is there such that people start orienting towards the auditors.
Right.
Okay, fine. What are the auditors looking for?
Right.
What sort of requirements, what criteria are they following?
Right.
If you don't know what that is, then people write everything because they're thinking, well, I don't know what I should be writing, so I'll write everything.
Yeah.
The other person you should be getting to know their quirks and whatever is your supervisor, your boss, because that person has all the power over you. The auditor is a distant entity that will come into your life every once in a while, and technically your supervisor is actually responsible ultimately for that. So if anyone gets in trouble, it would be the supervisor potentially for not guiding you about this. But so I'd get to know your supervisor and what do they want? And it's possible that your supervisor is stupid. And in the case of that, do your own research and maybe figure out and be like, so I'm trying to save time because of this whole 100% thing. And I'm thinking I might be able to scale back on this, or do what I did. I just scaled back my notes until someone yelled at me. I did this when I worked at an agency. I was anxious in the beginning. I would write a lot. And I was like, if I'm going to do this the rest of my career, this is miserable. So I was like, I wonder if I'll get away with this level of conciseness. And I did that for a couple months, and at this agency, all of my notes were read thoroughly. Wow. Okay. It wasn't just a signing, like it was required by it wasn't just my supervisor, it was a whole bunch of people, including the government and stuff, would have to read everything. And I got no feedback. So I was like, okay, let's see if I go a little bit more concise. No word. More concise. No word. More concise. Then there was a word, but it wasn't very pointed. And I was like, I wonder if I went even more concise. And then I basically learned that the word I was getting wasn't really a requirement. It was more an observation. And eventually I had a reputation for being very concise in my notes, which was appreciated by some and lamented by others, but ultimately nothing happened to me. So guess who won? Me.
Yeah.
And the client, I guess, also, but me. I win because I saved all that time.
Right.
And I also knew that they wouldn't fire me over it. So I don't know if everyone would know that, but I don't know. That's just kind of my style.
I like it.
It's like, I'm not getting any clear answers from people. So let's just run some tests and see what happens. Anyway, going on. Also, would you ever do a show on the impact of telehealth and the quality of services provided? Well, Bob, you're the expert on this in this room. Well, so what are your thoughts?
It works. It's not as good as in person. I don't have an office to see people in anymore. I let it go because I never go there.
You have a home office, but you don't see clients physically.
No.
You couldn't do physical in-person therapy if you wanted to at this point.
Because the way my house is set up, and it would interfere with Colleen's private life. So yeah. So we can't. But I have fantasized about putting an office in my backyard, and have taken an informal poll. I've asked 6 or 7 of my people, if you could see me in person, would you want to? All of them said no. That they might like to do it occasionally, but the inconvenience of having to travel, and that what they were doing they believed was sufficient. So, and I happen to think that's true. If I didn't think it was sufficient, I'd probably go deliver pizza, because everybody.
Yeah, you have a lot of integrity and personal pride in your work. Right. So if you're doing 100% online, and your practice is full, so
it is.
You have how many clients do you have?
Probably about 35.
How many hours a week?
Somewhere between 20 and 26. Mm-hmm. And that's it.
I think that's a pretty common, robust private practice, especially couples. Most of your clients are couples. That's a lot more taxing than individuals. So.
Right. So, I wouldn't want to do more. In fact, I would not want to do more. Now, I have a friend who, after the pandemic, went back to seeing people almost exclusively in person. And I don't know. I mean, that's true. That's a thing. I just saw my friend yesterday. I mentioned her earlier. She it's all virtual. She does DBT. She does it all virtually. So her group and her one-on-one clients.
Do you think it has impacted the quality of service?
Yeah.
How so?
I think it's less because you have less data. And there's a vibe that you can't get. Like with couples, I can't see what they're doing below their chests. So I don't know if they're holding hands. I don't know what's happening. So, it's less data. And every now I'll be talking to them and they'll say, well, which one of us are you talking to? And I'm like, oh yeah, you can't read my mind and you don't know where I'm looking because I'm just looking, they see a face on a screen is all. So I have to, sorry about that.
Do you ever have to tell them to position the camera more better so you could, because, the common way that people do this is they take their laptop and they put it on the coffee table and they sit on the couch.
Right.
And the way that the camera is and the angle and the lighting, I find to be a very poor representation of the human being on the other side. And, a better angle is if they can stack a bunch of books and put the laptop on top of that and maybe sit at the dining table or something. Yeah. Do you ever have to do that for people?
My big problem, I don't do that, but my big problem is sound quality. The microphones that are built into computers aren't very sensitive. So
it's a trade-off because if they're sensitive, then they pick up everything.
Everything, right. So I can't hear what people say when their voices get soft. And you know how people talk to each other. They talk to each other softly sometimes, and that's totally appropriate. So lately...
You can wear earbuds, but you'd have to have 2 sets of earbuds, which I don't think computers allow, but they should.
Oh, right. They could wear earbuds and
You'd hear them more. They would hear you easily, and you'd probably hear them more easily.
Well, I have a very good microphone, so I can whisper and I'm heard.
Right.
But nobody does. Right. And so I miss stuff, and I'm like, I might say, can you say that again? I couldn't quite hear it. Mm-hmm. Or I'll say, it isn't necessary for me to hear every word. So if you want me to hear it, you'll have to tell me. But if that's just, you don't have to if you don't want to. So.
Yeah, it's just so interesting how I have just completely skipped this whole thing.
Yeah, you use the phone.
I use phone, yeah.
Yeah.
And
do you think that you miss anything because you can't see?
Well, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
But all these clients I've had for years and years, so I know their inflections and whatnot. Yeah. I don't have, if I'm talking to you on the phone, I don't need to see you to understand you. Right. If I don't know you or I never saw you in person, then I would have no idea, I think.
Yeah.
or maybe I'd get to know over time. Another benefit is that the client could be on the phone with me and be laying in their bed in a dark room.
Right.
They don't have to be sitting up erect, looking at a laptop.
Right.
And for me, I like to pace. I have this little track around this office.
I occasionally do phone sessions. I pace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a pacer.
Yeah.
So
it's nice, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't just stand there and talk or sit there and talk.
No,
pace.
Yeah.
So yeah, I completely just evaded, because I would occasionally do phone sessions with clients if they were out of town or something. And so I was extremely familiar with that, and just did that. I mean, even some of the clients that I had during the pandemic, I had done that before, so it was just a no-brainer.
Yeah, easy to
trim. And it's just interesting to think, because for you continued to do, is it Zoom, or what do you use?
Yeah, I use
Zoom.
Yeah.
Do you have like the therapist HIPAA compliant version of Zoom?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the current landscape, but I remember there was
a lot of talk about that at the beginning. Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
Then for me, I went phone, and then you have a colleague that's in person. And so as a client, unless you started with the therapist in the beginning and chose an online or an in-person or a phone therapist, you're just, as a client, you're just at your therapist whim in terms of what they want to do, right? Because the therapist, your colleagues, like, no, I forced them all to do in person.
In person, yeah.
And I suspect a lot of them were like your clients that were thinking, well, we would prefer not to because of the convenience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the beginning, and I've been studying this for a long time, this online telehealth. I chose this as a project to investigate around the year 2010 because it had already been around for a while, but it wasn't anything like it was today. And I thought I was going to find that it was ridiculous that even people were thinking about doing this, that they were thinking about doing it over the phone or email or over video chat or video conference. I just thought, like, in terms of my principles and how I felt about things and my experience with phone therapy versus in-person therapy, I just thought, like, this is stupid. But I looked into the research, and there was enough at the time to demonstrate that online therapy, telehealth, can be just as effective. You have to be trained, and some clients might not be geared towards it. Someone that doesn't work well with technology, right, or someone that communicates in a way that you really do need to be in person. But, it's kind of like an option. I mean, meaning it's kind of a lateral move, and it really just depends on a lot of other factors. It's not inherently less quality. And that was surprising to me. And I also learned that there's a lot of ethics and standards of practice and competencies as a therapist that you need to have. Like, you can't just do it. You have to learn how to do it, even if you've been doing therapy for a while, because there's specific things, even legal things, because you need to account. Normally when clients come into our office, well, we make sure the office is HIPAA compliant and soundproof and safe. But for some clients, wherever they're at, it's like, you don't know, right? You could have a client that thinks, I'm going to do therapy while I use heavy machinery or something. And unless you say you can't do that, like, that's an exaggeration, but
right,
something like that. And so there's all that. And so that was surprising to me. I continued to say, well, not for me, from either direction. I don't want to be a client in online therapy, and I don't want to be a therapist with online therapy.
Right.
So then we see the pandemic, and we see this massive shift. I mean, just a sea change. I don't know if there's another industry that was more affected. I'm sure there are, but
schools maybe.
No, schools are all back in person again.
Oh, you mean, permanent? Yeah, right. Got it.
Yeah. The therapy landscape is permanently changed.
Yeah.
Because you're not going back to in person.
I think about it, but no, I'm not.
There's a good chance you will never see another client in person again for the rest of your career.
Here's one for you. All the men are 5'8" and all the women are 5'4". I have no idea, but in my head, that's what they all are.
And they all smell amazing.
They do.
There's a chance that and I know a lot of therapists that are like that.
Yeah.
not only because the clients consider it more convenient, but the therapist does too, of course. And it's less, you make more money as a therapist.
I don't pay office rent.
Yeah. And clients are more likely to show up,
Yeah.
because of obvious reasons. So, and it's better for the environment. You could argue pretty easily, and safer because you're not on the roads. So
I wonder how it affected the traditional analysts.
Good question. I don't know.
Maybe they just do phone.
I'm going to take a guess and say they were not a fan. Because those folks, just to be attracted to analysis, you're probably already a little bit of a Luddite and, a stick in the mud when it comes to technology. So I'm going to take a guess and say they weren't a fan. In fact, Phil Cushman, my mentor who died tragically last year, he wasn't an analyst, but he was very close to an analyst and hung out with a lot of analysts. And I'm positive, was not a fan of online therapy. He wasn't a fan of anything technologically related. He had a lot of opinions about it. Did
he do it too? Did he?
I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know what he did. I know he taught online because we had to at the university.
Right, they forced you.
I'm guessing we must have talked about it, but I don't remember.
He taught in the PsyD program?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to have to interrupt right here and take a break because we have to do that. What do you say, Bob?
Yeah, let's take a break.
All right, we're back from the break. So now it is interesting as I say all this because I am doing online therapy still to this day, and I could choose not to, but I have so few clients at this point, and the clients that I have, I think, and I've talked with them about this, that it is better for them. And like I said, I've had them for so long. I think it would be way different. I can't imagine, Bob, if I had a new client and I had to meet them and absorb their vibe through a webcam. I just can't. Now, of course, this technology is getting better. I don't know if you've seen some of the new stuff where eye contact is possible. Like they'll either put a camera in the middle of the screen so you can actually have eye contact, or AI will move your eyes to have eye contact. So you're looking at a camera above the screen, but AI will move your pupils down so that it's looking straight into the camera.
That is just completely weird.
I said that backwards. You're looking at the screen away from the camera, but then AI will move your pupils to look into the camera.
Right.
Yeah. And it looks, AI is getting better and better, and I've seen demonstrations of it, and it looks real. Mm-hmm. And, if it glitches occasionally, the benefit of having eye contact with your clients is so much,
right.
The benefit is so much higher.
Just way down deep in our DNA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So to have new clients over the phone, especially, but over video, that'd be better than over the phone. But because I assume you've had a lot of new clients that you've never met in person.
I have never met most of my clients in person.
And
they're all 5'8" and 5'4" though.
Yeah, but it's probably a lot of just lack of familiarity for me. I'm sure I'd get used to it. Yeah. And there's a way to convey feeling and communication and assessment through that medium for sure. I'm not. I have to remind myself. I don't have experience with that because I haven't had a new client in 5 or 6 years. But I do worry. And you even say, "Hey, I think this is not as high of a quality." Yeah. Well, so when you say that, do you say like how much of a lower quality?
If I had to rate it like a %?
Well, what's the consequence of it potentially having an average lower quality in your practice? What's the consequence to the clients?
I think, well, it's hard to say. I mean, there's a couple factors. One is if you're meeting at home versus coming into a therapist office, you don't have a transition. You're just moving, most people are like, okay, work, then therapy, then back to work, or something like that. So there's no transition. Plus their kids are running around, right? Or their cat comes in. Like I have a client, every session, their child walks into the room. I kind of think there must be something to that. But
like the child is is anxious about something.
Yeah. He's
Yeah.
cute little kid. He's like 7 or something.
Yeah, that's very normal.
Yeah.
Just be like, I wonder how mom's doing.
Right. Checking in. So, if we were in the office, they would be uninterrupted. I would be sitting close to them, so my proximity would be a treatment factor. Whereas, camera doesn't, I don't know. Does the body feel like the person is close, depending on how much of them they see in the screen? I don't know how that works. I miss, all the cues that take place from the chest down. So if somebody's knees jiggling, I don't know it.
But also, 3D is important to our perception. Also, like, you of course can hear their voice, but it's processed through a compressor. It's delayed half a second usually, and it's being pumped into your ears through an artificial means, a speaker that might be of varying quality or something.
Right.
And so, there's some loss there.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. So, well, if we put it into some kind of concrete form, and I could see this taking a number of different forms of consequence. One consequence is that instead of fixing your problems in 9 sessions, you need 10 sessions or something like that because of this loss of information. So that's one consequence to clients. Another consequence is you're never really going to get to that deeper material because it's, for some client therapist combos, it's just not possible to go there given this other format. And I guess along those lines, like clients, I guess if we think about it from their end, won't feel transformed in the way that they would being in person. Even going to an office, right? There's a feeling that you feel when you walk into your therapist's space, and there's pros and cons to that, of course, because of course the other side is, for some clients, they're intimidated by the space and they are much more relaxed and able to go deeper when they're at home, sitting on their bed or something.
Right.
But anyway, what kind of negative consequence do you think is happening to your clients because of it?
So, like, in terms of overall outcome, does therapy take longer online? I have no idea how to assess that.
Are problems not being worked on as fast because you're not assessing things fast enough because there's not enough information, or what do you think what's the consequence?
If I thought that was happening, I'd probably do something about it if I could, but
Right.
I can't think of that happening. So, honest to God, I actually can't answer this question. I don't know.
So maybe it's just a bias you have, this assumption. It
is. It's definitely that. It's definitely a bias and assumption. Now, don't get me wrong. I love my commute. I just walk down the hall, right?
Yeah.
I always dress. I always wear pants. Nothing weird, right? I don't always wear shoes.
They're assless pants, but they're still pants.
They're pants, man. They count, right? But it's a bias. All my training is in seeing people in person.
Do you think it feels less warm?
Yeah.
Maybe? Okay.
Yeah.
And does that have a consequence on the speed or effectiveness?
I don't know. Because if anything, if I said something about myself personally, is I'm warmer than I was 5 years ago towards my people. So it's hard to know. It's not apples and apples.
We've talked briefly about this before, but why are you warmer now? What was preventing you from being warm in the past?
Oh, I think just training.
I mean, you were warm in the past, but
Yeah.
not as.
Training and and hanging out with you and my personal counseling and then I got some really, really, really good training when I was getting certified in EFT. I'd say it's a combination of all those factors that have slowed me down and made me more warm. And then the chipping away of my sense of responsibility for whether or not something happens in therapy, which is a chipping away, but I have chipped away at it. And so as a result, I would say to my people, I'm cool in the gang.
And allowed your true self as a therapist to come out as a therapist.
Yeah.
Because it's not like you adopted warmth.
No.
You were just suppressing it before. Or things were getting in the way.
Yeah, I'd say that things were getting in the way. So last week I saw this, or a couple weeks ago I saw this couple. I love them. They're really lovely people. And one of them is very sort of rational or logical or whatever. And that's kind of his approach to his marriage is, it's performance based. Like, I'm a good guy if I perform well. So if she's upset with me, I did not perform well. And they do have a big problem in their marriage that they're working on. They're doing great. But toward the end of our meeting, I said to him, do you ever have a sense of wonder anymore? And he asked me what that meant. And I'm like, how like when you're a kid and it's all new and you're just exploring it and you're learning, whatever. Like, do you ever have a sense of wonder in your marriage that this is an area where you might be learning or exploring? And he said, I don't think I let her see me. And that was really cool and important and also quite sad. But essential that he got to say and express to his wife who, she doesn't know. She's learning because we've been at it for a while. And that's bilateral. He's learning too about her. But I liked that question. And I was thinking when I asked him, I was thinking about that, Good Will Hunting. I really like that movie. That has a nice portrayal of a therapy relationship.
Aside from him strangling Matt Damon.
Yeah. That aside, I've only done that twice. Right.
But the rest of it, I agree. It is one of the best depictions of a style of therapy that is close to you and me.
Yeah. And he says to the kid, he's like, because he's mooning about this thing that happened to him that has nothing to do with their therapy. And he says to him, do you have a soulmate? And Will says, I define that term.
Oh, in the movie.
In the movie, yeah.
Will. So start over what? Robin Williams
says to him when he's moaning about this interview he had with the, NSA, and they wanted to hire him to do high-level code-breaking math, right? And he's moaning about why that's a bad idea, and he's kind of getting a little righteous. And so Robin Williams says to him, do you have a soulmate? And he says, well, define that term. And Robin Williams says, someone who challenges you. And he's like, yeah, I got Freud and Kant and Kierkegaard and all these people, And he goes, well, they're all dead. There's not a whole lot of dialogue with them. And, well, yeah, I got Chucky. Well, Chucky doesn't count. Chucky laid down in traffic for you, right? Chucky's like Chucky's family. He doesn't count. And they talk about this thing, but really what they're talking about is, do you let anybody see you? Does anybody walk with you that close? We all go into our adult relationships with the template that we have, and it doesn't always include much intimacy, because maybe that got discouraged, or maybe we had parents that were just as scared as we are, or who knows what, I don't know. And to consider something outside of my if you ask a fish, what does wet feel like? They just say, well, I don't know, it's Monday, right? But to actually consider that there's such a thing as air and an environment that you do not know, that you might enjoy.
Having never been seen, you might not know what you're missing.
Yeah.
When you tear up, are you sad for the world or for yourself?
Both. I'm thinking about this couple's lovely people. And of course, I'm thinking about me and the ways in which I hide from Colleen.
Do you cry for wishing that you could be understood, safe to be seen and be yourself?
Well, it's kind of like that. You ever hear that Sam Kinison joke? He's like, they're all standing around Jesus on the cross, and they're all saying, oh, poor Jesus, why does he have to die? And Jesus says, if you got a ladder and a pair of pliers, right? So like when I think about that, I'm like, she's in the next room, literally. And in what way could I approach her? And when I do, I'm often rewarded by her attention and her interest and care. But I'd say most of the time, I feel like it's insurmountable. Like the other day, I was laying in bed and I was upset about something in our marriage, and I said out loud, I exist. Seemed important just to acknowledge I do indeed exist. And also she's right there. Like she's literally right there. So,
but that,
it's like she's right.
But that undermines your trauma as if you could just simply overcome it by making a choice.
Yeah, I don't think you can. But I do think that I way too often forego the possibility of contact.
Yeah.
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 Because we don't need to be like lockstep.
No.
The little space and togetherness is fine. That's fine. But
you teared up also for your couple, and that it was sweet of him to express that and long for that.
And long for that.
And you want that for him.
Yeah. I don't think it's in his his realm to consider anything other than I'm good enough if I perform good enough.
What does it feel like, if a client asked you, well, how do I know when I'm being understood and seen?
What does it feel like if a client asks me, how do I know?
Well, I mean, if a client asks you, what does it feel like? How do I know? I've never had that before. What should I be looking for, and what would it feel like? What benefit does it have?
I'd probably say, hey, what do you think happens between us? Like, how much do I get to see you? In what ways do you hide? Are there certain topics that you will not talk about because that's just not done? Because that's a rule that the brain made somewhere along the way. Like, in what way do I get to see you? Like, what do you perceive as the limits of our connection? And, most of my people, if it's not couple therapy, they have a partner. And I always think, what's happening here is going to mirror what happens in the relationship with the partner. So if they're a hider with me, they're going to be a hider with their partner, or vice versa. If they're a hider with their partner, they're probably hiding from me too. They don't necessarily recognize it because it's Monday, right? Mm-hmm. But I am frequently wanting more contact with my individual clients. And
why?
Well, I like it. That's not the reason. I do like it. Because I don't think most of us have a good model of what's possible.
Yeah. But what's the benefit?
The potential that somebody could, as a result of learning in our efforts together, start to have that happen in their life. Though I do think that there's something fundamentally helpful in that somebody loves you. Somebody cares about you. Mm-hmm. And, that I get to be that guy to the degree that they'll let me. Mm-hmm. But I like the idea that, like my first therapist said to me 100 years ago, Bob, the kind of intimacy that you have here with me, now I want you to go find that out there in the world. And I was like, are you fucking kidding? No way. That's not possible. So I was making a rule, or was already subscribing to a rule. Not useful. And I moved to Seattle right then. That's when she said it. She's like, okay, go forth and cross the country.
And then we met.
And then I met you about 2 years later, 3 years later, 2 years later.
After you ran into an innocent Chinese couple, man.
Oh, poor guy. Oh, poor people. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's really beautiful.
Thank you.
I hope it inspires the listeners to think about that for themselves.
Yeah.
We could all use more of that.
Yeah.
The way that the benefit that I would say, I guess, is that I believe more and more that attachment, security, closeness, intimacy, being known, loyalty, dedication, long-term relationships that are persistent and constant, present, not just a friend or even a spouse that is your person on paper, but mm-hmm. they're literally right next to you, like for most of the time. That in the same way that we need water and food, we need that. It's not a spiritual thing. It could be, but I think it's a physical thing.
Yeah.
It's harder to detect the neurological or the biological effects because it's more elusive. When you don't have water, you can test this person doesn't have fluids in their veins, or their I don't know, their gutty works aren't working correctly or something. You can measure those things. When you don't have food, you don't have this mineral, or you don't have this calorie that you can burn in certain areas of your body that you start to show effects, you know. But when it comes to what you're talking about, I think it's just as detrimental and just as beneficial to us if we don't have it or we do, but it's hard to pinpoint exactly the physical effects, but there are physical effects.
Yeah.
And they turn into chronic problems of loneliness and anxiety and isolation and conspiracy theories and
at the worst.
Suspicion of the other political party and drug abuse and workaholism and materialism and misery and Andrew Tate.
Who's that?
He's a toxic masculine proselytizer. Proselytizer.
Yeah. Eleanor Rigby. That's a song about isolation.
Right.
It's a good song.
And I would say that the benefit is all-encompassing on your biology in the same way that food and water is.
Yeah.
So I think that's the benefit.
Yeah.
And it feels good.
Yeah.
And it feels grounding and meaning focusing, because without it, what do you focus on? You focus on whatever the culture gives to you, materialism, wealth, fame, looking good, being smart, throwing the right parties, having the right point of view, having the most likes, whatever.
Yeah.
But it doesn't fill the hole.
It does not.
So your tears are for him recognizing that he now knows that he wants it and misses it.
He recognizes there's something he could be missing. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So think about it yourself, listener. Where are you? What is that need?
Yeah.
And we're all at somewhat of a deficit, I'm guessing, because of our current society and lifestyle. I think it was facilitated a couple hundred, even just 100 years ago, even in other parts of the country or the world right now, and the country, but places that we consider to be really hard up, right? Because they don't have cell phones or running water, and we look down and I'd hate to be in their shoes. Mm-hmm. But there is research demonstrating that although let's try to give them running water and maybe cell phones, but the lifestyle they have looks deplorable to us. With they look poor. There's 8 people living in a small shack. There's no privacy. They poop in a hole in the ground. But research shows that a lot of these folks are happy and not lonely, and don't have nearly the rates of suicide and anxiety and depression and PTSD and psychopathology and violence and anger and all those things. And you're thinking, well, why? Well, because what's the difference? The difference is from the day they're born until the day they die, they are within eye shot and earshot of their kin, their people. I'm not saying we should ignore them and not give them medical care or whatever, but in our Western society, we've just completely lost sight of that importance. Yeah. And we've been chasing this other thing that is killing us and making us miserable. And then therapy comes along to be, a salve on the wound that continues to be damaged, and then telehealth comes out.
Oh, wow. Here we go.
I'm just joking. And so well, let me ask you this final question.
Sure.
Over Zoom, do you feel like you can feel, so your client or your therapist that you see that's also over online?
Correct.
Well, I guess that's the question. When you saw your therapist in person before.
Yep.
So do you feel like you can have the same deep, because you're a therapist and you have a deep connection and you focus on it every session. Does it feel as deep?
Yeah. I think it would feel different if I was in person. I might have more fear, but it does feel deep, and I have plenty of stuff that comes up. So
does it help to feel less fear? Does it help your therapy to feel less fear?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because you could imagine that.
Yeah.
Takes the edge off so
Yeah.
that you don't have to be preoccupied as much. But
I don't know.
But the con would be it's not intense enough to actually be a corrective experience.
Right. Yeah, no, I haven't noticed that to be true. The corrective experiences that I have with him are, as I don't know how to measure that.
Just as robust as in person before.
Yeah.
Huh. I mean, it's hard to know because there's a progression of the therapy. So if you were in person the whole time, it might have been even more intense or something.
Sure.
But I think that's a pretty good indicator right there.
Yeah.
Because you're over Zoom and you're connecting on, I'm going to put you in the top 0.01% of therapy sessions in the Seattle area in terms of connection and depth and communication about emotion and humanness through a webcam without eye contact.
Right. Yeah.
That says something. Because in my head, I'd be like, well, you could do CBT over Zoom, no problem. And I still believe that.
Yeah.
But if you can do your style of therapy with your therapist over Zoom and it still is as intense and deep, then, I mean, that's all you need to hear, really.
Yeah, right.
It just takes two people to be willing to go there, really.
Nicely put. That's true.
Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.